depending on what your AGI timeline is, mine's like 2030 or something like this, then if you start off on a deep tech journey today, usually that you're talking about a 10-year journey for true deep tech, in my opinion. So then now you have to just consider AGI appearing in the middle of that journey. So what does that mean? It's not bad necessarily, but you have to take that into account, right? Will it be able to leverage it? What will the AGI system do with it? There's a lot of innovation left in the thinking paradigms, I would say. Again, I think we're doing fairly simplistic things, fairly brute force. One could imagine, I think there's a lot of scope, for example, in monitoring the chain of thought, maybe interjecting midway through a thought process.
That's Demis Hassabis, CEO of Google's DeepMind speaking. He said his AGI timeline is 2030, not 2045 or some distant future, 2030. That's literally 4 years from now, and I want you to think about what your life actually looks like in 4 years. Your job, your kids, the thing you spent years training for, the career you are still paying student loans for. 4 years. And the people building this thing are already telling you to your face that agents, meaning AI systems that work autonomously without you, are just getting started. They are not hiding it. They are saying it in rooms full of investors who are nodding along because they already know what it means for their portfolios. What nobody in that room is talking about is what it means for everybody else. Here is what honestly worries me. Right now, these systems still make mistakes. They reason themselves into a corner and then act from that corner anyway. They know the answer is wrong and do it regardless. Now, these guys building them are saying that gap, that last flaw between a flawed machine and a fully reasoning machine, might be 1 or 2 small fixes away from closing. Once that closes, you are not competing with a tool anymore. You are competing with something for that reason. Something that does not get tired, does not ask for a raise, does not need health insurance, and works every hour of every day. And the moment that becomes cheap and scalable, which it already is becoming, the economic argument for hiring a human in most roles simply collapses. Let's continue listening to Hassabis.
One of the weirder things that we're seeing right now is like engineers can do like 500 to 1,000 times the amount of work that they were doing 6 months ago, I guess. I mean, the people in this room, there are people who are doing about 1,000x the work that Steve Yegi talks about this. It's like 1,000x the work that a Google engineer from the 2000s was doing.
I think it's very exciting. I think the small models have many uses. One is obviously cost, but the speed can allow, if you think about coding even or other things, you can iterate a lot faster. Also, especially if you're collaborating with the system. I think that there's a lot of need for having fast systems that maybe are not quite frontier, like you said, 90%, but that's plenty good enough, and actually you gain back more than the 10% on the iteration speed. So, and then the other big thing I think is running these things on the edge, again for efficiency reasons, but also for privacy and security reasons too. If you think about different devices that you might run these systems on that process very personal information, you can also think about robotics as well, robots in your house. I think you're going to want very efficient, very powerful local models, which maybe are orchestrated with some bigger models, frontier models that are in the cloud, but you only delegate to that in certain circumstances, and perhaps you process all of the audio-visual feed, let's say, locally, and that stays local. And the other big thing I think is running these things on the edge, again for efficiency reasons, but also for privacy and security reasons too. If you think about different devices that you might run these systems on that process very personal information, you can also think about robotics as well, robots in your house.
Guys, I need you to stop and do this math with me. One engineer today is doing the work of 1,000 engineers from 20 years ago. That is not me being dramatic. That is what was said in that room without anybody flinching. So I want you to tell me something. If one person can now do what 1,000 people used to do, what happens to the other 999 people? Where do they go? What do they do? Because I honestly do not see anyone answering that question. I just see people in expensive rooms calling it exciting. And then he casually mentions robots in your house. That is just the next logical step. And maybe it is, but I want you to think about what that sentence actually means for the people who currently clean homes, deliver packages, do repairs, do security, the jobs that survived the last wave of automation because they required a physical human body in a physical space. That excuse is now disappearing too. too. I am not saying the technology is evil. I am only saying the people celebrating it are not the ones who are going to feel it first.
There still might be one or two things missing on top of what what we already know works. So continual learning, long-term reasoning, some aspects of memory, these are still unsolved, and how to get the systems to be more consistent across the board. I think all of these are going to be required for AGI. Now, it might be that the existing techniques can just scale up to that with some innovation and some incremental innovation, but it could be that there's still one or two big ideas left that need to be cracked. I don't think it's more than one or two, if there are out there. And I think my betting is about 50-50 if that's the case. It's pretty cool, the dream cycles, and we used to think about this with consolidation with episodic memory. Actually, that's what I studied for my PhD, is how the hippocampus works and integrates new knowledge gracefully into the existing knowledge base. So the brain does that amazingly well. It does it during sleep, especially things like REM sleep, replaying back episodes that are important so that you can learn from it.
So here is what I find honestly chilling about this part. He is describing how AI is being built to learn the way your brain learns, replaying memories during rest cycles, integrating new information into existing knowledge without losing what it already knows, continuously updating itself based on experience. Your brain does that. It took millions of years of evolution to get there, and they are engineering it into a machine right now. And once they solve that, once AI can learn continuously the way you do, it does not just get smarter in the lab, it gets smarter on the job. Every task it does makes it better at the next one. Every mistake teaches it something. And unlike you, it does not forget, it does not plateau, and it does not have bad days. I honestly think most people have not thought through what continuous learning AI actually means for human skill. Right now, you have an advantage over AI in any job that requires experience built up over years. The moment AI learns continuously on the job, that advantage is gone. And he is saying they are 50-50 on whether they even need a breakthrough to get there.
DeepMind has historically leaned into reinforcement learning and search, AlphaGo, AlphaZero, and MuZero. How much of that philosophy is actually embedded in how you're building Gemini today? Is RL still underrated?
Yeah, I think potentially it is. It sort of goes in ebbs and waves. We've worked on agents since the beginning of DeepMind. In fact, that's what we said we were working on. So all of the Atari work and AlphaGo, most specifically, they're agent systems. And what we meant by that is systems that are able to accomplish goals on their own and make active decisions and make plans. And so, of course, we were doing it in the domain of games to make it tractable, and then doing increasingly complex games, things like StarCraft after AlphaGo, AlphaStar. So we basically did all the games that are out there. And then, of course, the question is, can you generalize those models to be world models or models of language, not just models of simple games or even complex games? And that's what the last few years has been about. But really, you can think of a lot of the things we're doing today, all the leading models with thinking modes and chain of thought reasoning as aspects of what was sort of pioneered with AlphaGo coming back now. And I actually think there's a lot of work we did back then that is relevant today, and we're sort of relooking at some of those old ideas at scale today in a more general way, including things like Monte Carlo tree search and other ways of augmenting the RL on top of the reinforcement learning we're ready to do today.
Obviously, today you need bigger and bigger models to be smarter and smarter, but then we're also seeing distillation, and then smaller models can be quite a bit faster. I think you guys have incredible flash models that are like you're finding that they're 95% as good as the Frontier, and at like 1/10 the price. Is that right?
I think that's one of our core strengths. Is you have to build the biggest models to have the Frontier capabilities. But I think one of our biggest strengths has been distilling and packing that power into smaller and smaller models very quickly.
This is the part that honestly scares me for white-collar workers specifically. He is describing how the same techniques that taught AI to beat humans at the most complex board games ever invented are now being applied to general reasoning, the same architecture, just pointed at everything else now. And then he says something that I do not think people are taking seriously enough. These systems are getting cheaper, 95% as capable at 1/10 the price. And that ratio is moving in one direction. Think about your industry right now, whatever it is, and I want you to ask yourself honestly, At what price point does it stop making sense for a company to pay a human to do what you do? Not because the AI is perfect. It does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough and cheap enough. And good enough and cheap enough is already here for a lot of roles. And it is getting better every few months. The folks running this technology are optimizing hard for cost reduction. That is not a side effect. That is the product.
So actually, when you mentioned our original way we used to articulate our mission statement, which is still the way we think about it, is there was two steps to it. One was solve intelligence, i.e. build AGI. And then step two was use it to solve everything else. We had to change that a bit over time because people were like, do you really mean solve everything else? And we did mean that. And I think people are sort of understanding what that means today. But specifically, I was meaning solve other, what I call root node problems in science. So areas of science that would unlock whole new branches or avenues of discovery. And AlphaFold is the prototypical example of what we want to do. So over 3 million researchers around the world, pretty much every biology researcher in the world uses AlphaFold now. And I was told by some of my, pharma executive friends that, almost every drug discovered from now on will have used AlphaFold at some point in the drug discovery process. So that's something we're very proud of, and it's the sort of impact that we hope to have with AI. But I do think it's just the beginning. I don't really see any area of science or engineering that this won't be able to be helpful with. And the ones you mentioned, I think we're at almost like an AlphaFold 1 moment. So it's got very promising results, but it's not quite solved the grand challenge yet in that domain. But I think we're going to have a lot to talk about in the next couple of years on all those areas you mentioned, materials, which I think is very exciting, all the way to mathematics.
I don't know if you've noticed something. The moment anyone starts feeling the weight of what AI is actually doing, suddenly these guys shift the conversation to curing diseases, drug discovery, saving lives, and I see this every single time with these people. Every single time, the moment things get uncomfortable, out comes the cancer cure, out comes the miracle compound, out comes the story about the drug that is going to save millions of lives. And look, I am not saying that is a lie. Maybe it does help discover new drugs, but I want you to honestly notice how conveniently that story arrives every time someone might start asking the harder questions. It is the perfect deflection because nobody wants to argue against curing cancer. You cannot push back on that without sounding like a monster. So they wrap the whole thing in this beautiful humanitarian ribbon. AI is going to solve disease. AI is going to feed the world. AI is going to fix climate change. And while everyone is nodding along to that, the actual implications of what they just described quietly slide past without anyone examining them. He literally just laid out a formula for how AI identifies and cracks any problem domain wide open. And his example was medicine. But that formula does not care what domain you point it at. And the people in that room know exactly where else it points. They just find it much more comfortable to talk about saving lives than to talk about everything else.
We're working on these general systems like this thing, we have this system called Co-Scientist, and we have other algorithms like AlphaVolve that can go a little bit beyond what the basic Gemini will do. And obviously all the frontier labs are experimenting in this way. I've yet to see anything so far, and we all tinker with the same things, some maths problems that are a little bit harder than IMO and so on. I haven't seen anything yet that is a true, genuine, massive discovery. That's my personal opinion. I think it's coming. I think it may be related to this thing we discussed about creativity and actually going on beyond the bounds of what's known. So clearly that's just not pattern matching at that point, because there is no pattern to match to. And it's a bit more than extrapolation. It's some kind of analogical reasoning. And I don't think these systems have that, or at least we're not using them in the right way to do that. So the way I often say that in science is, can it come up with a hypothesis that's really interesting, not just solve one? When I say just, we're now talking about just like solving the Riemann hypothesis or something. This would be obviously amazing, or one of the Millennium Prize problems, and maybe we're a couple of years out from doing that. But I'd like to solve P equals NP. That's my favorite one. But even harder than that would be to come up with a new set of Millennium Prize problems that were regarded by top mathematicians to be as, deep and meaningful and worthy of lifetime of study and effort to solve. solve, right? I think that's another level harder. And we don't have, I still don't think we know how to do that. I don't think it's magical though. I do think these systems will eventually be able to do that. The way we would test that is, I sometimes call it my Einstein test, which is, can you train a system with the knowledge of cutoff of 1901, and then will it come up with, what Einstein did in 1905, including special relativity, his annus mirabilis? Can it do that, right? And then I think we could run that test. Maybe we should just run that test and keep seeing if that's possible. And once that is, then I think we're on the verge of these systems being able to invent something new, truly novel.
He is describing AI that does not just solve problems, AI that invents problems worth solving. And I honestly think that is the one that should keep you up at night more than the job stuff, because here is what that actually means. Human civilization runs on the assumption that human curiosity and human creativity are the engine. We discover things, we ask questions nobody asked before. We look at the world and see something that does not fit and pull on that thread until it becomes a new branch of science. That is what Einstein did in 1905. That is what every major intellectual leap in history has been. And he is sitting there saying they are building a test for whether AI can do that. And he thinks it can. Soon, once a machine can generate the questions that define the next century of human knowledge, what exactly is the human intellectual contribution? What do we do? What is our role in a civilization where the most important thinking is being done by something that does not eat or sleep or wonder or fear death? I do not have a clean answer to that. And honestly, neither does he. But he is building it anyway.
Depending on what your AGI timeline is, mine's like 2030 or something like this, then if you start off on a deep tech journey today, usually that you're talking about a 10-year journey for true deep tech, in my opinion. So then now you have to just consider AGI appearing in the middle of that journey. So what does that mean? It's not bad necessarily, but you have to take that into account, right? Will it be able to leverage it? What will the AGI system do with it? And it goes a little bit back to what you said earlier about AlphaFold and general AI systems. So one thing I can see happening is Gemini, Claude, or one of these general systems making use of AlphaFold like specialized systems as tools. I don't think we're going to have it just in one giant brain, because it will have too much regression. If I put all the proteins into Gemini, that wouldn't make sense. We don't need Gemini to do protein folding. Going back to your information efficiency, it will definitely affect its language skills or something like that, right? In a bad way. So much better, I think, is to have really good general purpose tool usage models that will then, maybe they could even train those specific tools, but they would be in a separate system. So I think that's kind of interesting to think through the implications of that, and then what you might build today. Also physical things too, like what kinds of factories would you build, what sorts of finance systems and so on. So I just think you need to really take that seriously, and on the one hand is and imagine what that world would look like, and then build something that would be useful if that comes in halfway through.
He just described a world where AI systems manage other AI systems, where a general AI picks up a specialized AI as a tool the way you pick up a calculator. And I want you to notice what is missing from that picture. Humans are not in the middle of it. Humans are upstream of it at the design stage and then largely out of the loop after that. The system runs, the system delegates, the system optimizes. He is telling founders to build things that will still be useful when AGI arrives halfway through their 10-year plan. But nobody is asking what ordinary people should build, what skills they should develop, what their 10-year plan looks like when AGI arrives in the middle of it. Because honestly, I don't think there is a comfortable answer to that, and I think the people in that room know it. I think that is precisely why the conversation stayed focused on founders and startups and investment theses. Because the alternative conversation, the one about what happens to the hundreds of millions of people who are not building the future but simply trying to survive in it, that conversation does not have a good ending. And that is the one nobody wants to have. See you in the next video.